So today we are going to discuss biological classification. So what is the definition of biological classification? It is a scientific procedure of arranging organisms into groups and subgroups on the basis of similarities or dissimilarities and then placing the groups into hierarchies of categories. So what does that mean? Suppose you have two types of organisms X and Y, and you need to group them into particular groups. Okay, so you, according to some particular characteristics that you observe in X, you place the organism X into groups called A, and you place the organism Y into group called B. So in this way, you have classified the two organisms into two groups A and B. So this is what we do in biological classification. You first arrange organisms according to the observable characteristics into groups and subgroups. Okay, and then after arranging and making those groups, you place them according to a hierarchy of categories. Okay, so suppose in this example that I talked about, you have two organisms X and Y, you need to group them. So you first group them into according to a particular observable characteristics. You place the organism called X to group A, and you place the organism called Y into group B, and then you say that A comes before B. Okay, so in this way you have performed biological classification. Suppose we take an analogy here, like geographical address, and we compare it to taxonomical address. So what is taxonomy? First of all, you need to know what is taxonomy. Taxonomy is the science of identification, classification and grouping of organisms. That means it is the study of the science which deals with first identification of organisms, then classification of organisms, and then grouping of organisms into particular hierarchies of categories. So these are the three steps. First, identification. You have to identify the organism. Then you have to classify the organism, and then you have to group the organism according to the common characteristics that you will observe. Suppose someone asks you to tell about your geographical address. So if you say the continent first, suppose I say that I live in Asia. Okay, so if I say I live in Asia, then it becomes very vague, right? Asia has a whole lot of countries. Which country I am referring to? It is not clear. So then I mention that I live in India. Okay, but India has many states, so you need to be more specific in which state you are living. So you then say that you live in say Mumbai, or you live in say Maharashtra. So that is the state. And then a state has many districts and cities, so you have to be again more specific. So you mention the city, you live in Mumbai, then Mumbai has many buildings. Okay, so you then specify the building where you are living. Now a building can have many floors, 14, 15, 16 floors. So you have to specify which floor you are living at, and the floor may have 2 or 3 rooms or apartments. So you have to be more specific in telling your geographical address. Like, so once someone knows your room or apartment, then he or she can easily identify you. Like if you say you live in Asia continent, then it is become very vague. It is becoming very vague, right? But when you are saying you live in this room or apartment in this floor of Mumbai city, then it is becoming very specific. Likewise, in biological classification also, the first hierarchy of classification that we have is kingdom. Now a kingdom has many groups and subgroups. Okay, so for example, a kingdom has many phylum. So if I say that a particular organism is belonging to a particular kingdom, I do not know, it is becoming very unspecific. Okay, but I want the specific classification. So what will I do? I will say about this phylum also. Okay, now a phylum will have a lot of classes. A phylum includes a lot of classes. So again, it is becoming very much unspecific. So I have to be more specific in describing the classification of that organism. So I will specify the class to which that organism is belonging to. Now a class will have several orders. So I need to be again more specific. I will describe the order of the organism. Now, a order may have many families, so I will have to specify the family as well. And a family may have many genuses. I will have to be specify in that. I will have to specify which genus I am talking about, and finally the species. So this is the last stage, which is very much specific to our organism. An organism will have only particular species. Okay. So suppose I describe the taxonomy for cat. Okay, so if I describe the taxonomy of cat as kingdom and animalia, okay, so that becomes very vague because kingdom animalia has lot of mammals within it. So how will I specify that I am particularly referring to a particular type of mammal, for example cat? Then I will have to specify the phylum, which is chordata. Okay, now I am going deeper, and now a phylum will have several mammals within it as well. Chordata has several chordates within it. So how will I refer to, I am talking about cat, I will refer to the class is Mammalia. Then I will refer to the order, then I will say the family, and then I will say the genus, and then the species. So Felis catus. When I say the species, it is becoming very clear that I am particularly referring to cat and not referring to any other mammal. But if I say only the kingdom or the phylum or any other higher hierarchy of classification, then it is becoming very vague because a kingdom or a phylum will have several organisms within it. How will you make out which organism you are particularly referring to? Right? So that is the main difference. So this is the higher hierarchy of classification, kingdom, and then as we move from downwards from kingdom to phylum to species, we have the lower hierarchies of classification. There are mainly three types of biological classification that we have. Number one is the artificial system of classification. Number two is the natural system of classification. And number three that we have is a phylogenetic system of classification. Now, what is artificial system of classification? Artificial system was a very primitive system of classification used by Aristotle. So, he used one or two morphological characters like habit and habitat of organisms for grouping. Suppose you have two organisms X and Y, okay, and if you find any sort of similarity between these two organisms on the basis of the habit or habitat, then you place it according to artificial system of classification. So this was the very primitive system used by Aristotle. So what did he do? He classified living organisms into two types on the basis of morphological characteristics. Number one, plants, and number two, animals. He divided animals again into two main subdivisions. These are the AIIMS with RBCs or with red blood, and ANIMA without RBCs and or without red blood. He also classified organisms into three main types on the basis of how they are walking or flying. Okay, so terrestrial for those who walk, flying for those who fly like birds, and aquatic for those who swim in water. So this was the sort of classification system used by Aristotle to classify living organisms. Now, natural system of classification uses natural relationship among organisms. Like you know about homology. It is actually the similarity in the structure, physiology, or development of different species of organisms. So it is the similarity among organisms on the basis of either the structure or physiology. Now we have phylogenetic system of classification. So it is based on evolutionary relationships. It is, for example, said that monocots are primitive to dicots. So if you can find an evolutionary relationship among organisms, then you can classify them according to phylogenetic system of classification. So the first classification system that was used was by Carl Linnaeus in 1758, in which he divided organisms into two major types, Plantae and Animalia. So, how did he choose which organisms should fall under the category Plantae and which organisms should fall under the category Animalia? He observed that those organisms that had cell wall, vacuole, had photosynthetic pigment chlorophyll, and had starch as the food reserve, he picked up and placed them under the category Plantae. So these were the four main categories that he used while placing organisms under the classification Plantae. So those organisms that had cell wall, vacuole, photosynthetic pigment chlorophyll, and starch, he placed those organisms under the category Plantae, and those organisms that had no cell wall, had organ system like excretory system, circulatory system, respiratory system, reproductive system, or they had they stored food as glycogen, and they could perform locomotion. So he placed those organisms under the category Animalia. So this was the first classification system that was used. Next, this two kingdom classification system was modified to make the three kingdom system of classification, in which we have three kingdoms like Protista, Plantae, and Animalia. So under Protista, all unicellular algae, fungi, and bacteria were placed, all unicellular. Under Plantae, we had multicellular plants, and under animals, we had multicellular animals. Four kingdom system of classification was proposed by Copeland in 1956. So he classified living organisms into four major classification systems. So number one, kingdom Monera, which all had mostly prokaryotic species. Number two, kingdom Protista, which had unicellular eukaryotes. Number three, Metaphyta, or the kingdom Plantae, which had all plants within it. And number four, we have Metazoa, or the kingdom containing all animals. Five kingdom system of classification, or it is called as the Whittaker system of classification, used by R.H. Whittaker. We will concentrate on five kingdom system of classification in this whole biology of class 11. We mostly deal with the five kingdom system of classification now, but one thing you should know, five kingdom system of classification has been further modified into six kingdom, and later we have nowadays 8 kingdom system of classification. So it was proposed by R.H. Whittaker. He divided living organisms into 5 different types: Monera, Protista, Plantae, fungi, and Animalia. So he divided all living organisms into 5 different types. So these were the 5 different classification systems that R.H. Whittaker used in proposing its 5 kingdom system of classification. So later, while developing the 6th kingdom system of classification, what did taxonomists do? They actually split up Monera into eubacteria and archaebacteria. The rest of the things remain the same. So after splitting of Monera, they gave rise to 2 new kingdoms, eubacteria and archaebacteria, and the rest we had Protista, Plantae, fungi, Animalia. So all total we have 6 kingdom system of classification. There is another system of classification where we have, it is called as 3-domain system of classification, where kingdom Monera has been split into 2 parts, eubacteria and archaebacteria, and Plantae, Protista, fungi, Animalia, all these things have been combined into eukarya. So they together form the classification, 3rd classification, which is eukarya. So eukarya had Protista, fungi, and the Plantae and Animalia. So the eukarya is actually the combination of these 4 classification systems. This is what makes up the 3rd domain. Okay, so this is what makes up the 3rd domain called as the eukarya. So now we have actually 8 kingdom system of classification, where kingdom Monera has been further split into eubacteria and archaebacteria. Along with that, follow the color code, Protista has been split into 3 kingdoms: Archezoa, Chorismita, Protista. So these together earlier used to form the kingdoms Protista, but now they have been split into 3 kingdoms: three new kingdoms have been formed from Protista. So this is actually Archezoa, Chorismeta and Protista, and then we have fungi, Animalia. So all total here we have 8 kingdom system of classification. This is the newest system of classification nowadays. This is very important. If we compare the properties according to 5 kingdom system of classification, we have 5 kingdoms: kingdom Monera, Protista, fungi, Plantae and Animalia. So kingdom Monera means all prokaryotes, Protista means all unicellular eukaryotes, fungi means all unicellular as well as multicellular eukaryotes, Plantae means all plants, and Animalia means all animals. So let's see. In case of Monera, the cell type is prokaryotic. In case of Protista, it is eukaryotic. Fungi, it is eukaryotic. Plantae is eukaryotic, and Animalia is eukaryotic. Level of organization, here we have unicellular. Protista is also unicellular. Fungi, both unicellular as well as multicellular. Plantae, we have tissue or organ. We are not talking at the cellular level, we are concentrated on the tissue level. Animalia, we have tissue or organ system. So cell wall in case of Monera is made up of peptidoglycan and mucopeptides. In case of Protista, the cell wall is made up of cellulose only, and in case of fungi, the cell wall is made up of chitin or cellulose. In case of Plantae, the cell wall is made up of only cellulose, and in case of Animalia, the cell wall is absent. Now in case of nutrition, kingdom Monera has autotrophic organisms within it, which may be phototrophic or chemotrophic, right? Or they have heterotrophic, which are of two types, parasite and saprophyte. So autotrophic means those who can prepare their own food. So autotrophs are of two types, either phototrophs or chemoautotrophs. Phototrophs means like majorly the plants who can prepare their own food through photosynthesis, or chemoautotrophs means who can prepare their own food through chemical synthesis. And heterotrophs are of two types, parasites and saprophytes. Heterotrophs means they cannot synthesize their own food and they depend on other organisms for their food. In case of Protista, we have mostly autotrophic organisms which are photosynthetic as well as heterotrophic organisms. So here we do not have any chemoautotrophic organisms within it. In case of fungi, we have heterotrophic organisms mostly, and here they are of two types, parasites and saprophytes. In case of plants, we have all autotrophic organisms within it, and in case of animals, we have all heterotrophic organisms within it. So in case of motility, kingdom Monera has either motile or non-motile organisms within it. Kingdom Protista is also motile or non-motile organisms. Kingdom fungi has all non-motile organisms. Kingdom Plantae has mostly non-motile organisms, and kingdom Animalia has mostly motile organisms. Examples of members of kingdom Monera are Archaebacteria, Eubacteria, Cyanobacteria, Actinomycetes, and Mycoplasma. In case of Protista, we have chrysophytes, dinoflagellates, euglenoids, slime molds, amoeba, plasmodium, paramecium, etc. In case of fungi, we have yeasts, mushrooms, and molds. In case of plants, we have all the plants starting from algae to bryophytes to pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and then up to angiosperms. And in case of Animalia, it starts from sponges, then invertebrates, and then vertebrates. So here we discuss the advantages and disadvantages of 5 kingdom system of classification. Because R.H. Whittaker's 5 kingdom system of classification is the classification on which our discussions will be based on in our subsequent lectures. So we see what are the advantages and disadvantages of this 5 kingdom system of classification. So first let's see the advantages. What is the first advantage? Prokaryotes differ from all other living organisms in the cellular structure. So prokaryotes differ from all other living organisms. That is why we have a separate kingdom for prokaryotes, which is called as kingdom Monera. Unicellular, multicellular organisms in this 5 kingdom system of classification have been kept separately. Fungi have been assigned a unique kingdom in this 5 kingdom system of classification based on their mode of nutrition, and it is better than the previous systems of classification. Now, despite all these advantages, we have some disadvantages for the 5 kingdom system of classification. What are they? Number one, unicellular algae are kept in kingdom Protista, whereas multicellular algae are kept in kingdom Plantae. So this is very important. Unicellular algae have been placed under kingdom Protista, while multicellular algae have been placed under kingdom Plantae. But we know that similar organisms must be put together. So if you are classifying algae, then you should put all the algae together under a single kingdom. Okay, but what has R.H. Whitaker done? He has classified algae further on the basis of cellularity, and where he has found unicellular algae, he has placed under kingdom Protista. Where he has found multicellular algae, he has placed under kingdom Plantae. So this is the main disadvantage. Next, there is diversity in kingdom Protista. Dissimilar organisms must not be kept in the same group. So if you look in the kingdom Protista, you will find many dissimilar organisms that have been placed in the same kingdom Protista, which is also not desired. There is no place for viruses. So viruses have not been assigned any kingdoms, any place in this five kingdom system of classification, and similar organisms are kept far apart from each other. For example, unicellular and multicellular algae. Like unicellular algae have been placed under kingdom Protista, and multicellular algae have been placed under kingdom Plantae. So similar organisms, though they are similar, they have been kept far apart from each other.